Your Partner in Success Radio is a free business podcast with host Denise Griffitts. It's all about great stories, conversation, and context to help you move your business and life forward with actionable tips and advice from her guest experts. To listen and subscribe, just find us on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you consume your podcasts.
Good morning and welcome to Your Partner in Success Radio, where top performers share their secrets to help you achieve your personal and your professional goals. I am your host, Denise Griffitts, and together with my genuinely amazing guests, we bring you inspiring and actionable insights to take your life and your business to the next level. Ranked in the top 2% globally, this podcast is a must listen. And again, it's because of my guests. They're fascinating. So whether you're tuning in for entrepreneurial tips, career advice, or personal development strategies, get ready to turn inspiration into action, challenges into triumphs, and dreams into reality. My guest today, Cynthia Kay, isn't just making waves. She's leading the charge and shaping the future of business communication. And I love this. In her words, there's a life cycle for each and every small business, and to be successful business owners, they must pay attention to the 4 phases: startup, operations, growth, and stepping out. A small business is not just a scaled-down version of a large one. Strategies that work well for larger organizations may be counterproductive for small ones. So small businesses can court and win big business if they play to their strength: responsiveness, fresh ideas, flexibility, and more. Cynthia, good morning. Welcome to Your Partner in Success Radio. It's good to have you here.
Oh, Denise, I am so delighted to be here, and thank you so much for the invitation, because I love talking business.
You and me both. And your book is on my desk. And I was telling you in the green room, on social media, I kind of disappear on the weekend. It's because I'm reading. I'm reading my guests' books, and nobody talk to me. No talking. Leave me alone. I'm reading.
Well, first of all, I am tremendously impressed that you read it, because a lot of people do these interviews without really diving deep into the content. And I just think it makes for such a good conversation when we're kind of talking about the same thing.
Well, it does. And here's my attitude about I've got hundreds of books in this room, hundreds. And every single book in here came from people like you. You have been my guest on Your Partner in Success Radio. And my attitude is, if you took the time to write the book and then send me the book, I owe you a reading and a review, and I've done both. I always read the book when it lands on my doorstep. I'm lying. I don't read it. I glance through it and I sticky note it, come back to this. But then the week of or the weekend of, depending on where you land on the podcast schedule, I read the book. And then it gets really fat because I've got sticky notes all over it by the end. So
and I want to know which pages you sticky noted, because I will take a good look at those.
Tell me what prompted you to write this book at this particular time. I asked you this in the green room, and I want you to share that response that you gave me with our audience, because I think it's important.
I think I wrote a book about 10 years ago, and it was called Small Business for Big Thinkers. And I wrote it because I was doing a lot of speaking to groups and doing a lot of advocacy, and people were actually asking, where's the book? And there wasn't a book. So I wrote it. And then over the past 10 years, I feel like I've experienced so much, and I've gone through some of these phases. And when I started to look at what was in the market and what was out there to help small business people, I really didn't see anything that covered the whole life cycle. I mean, there's a lot of books about, starting up, or there's a lot of books about, if you're finding your next adventure. But in my mind, if you're going to be successful, you have to look at all of those phases and really think about where you're going. And, I've had people say, well, but I'm past startup. And I go, yeah, but you're always starting something up in your business. So even though you may be into that next phase, there's new products, there's new services, there's reinventing yourself. So for me, it was really important to kind of dive deep into looking at what are those phases. And Honestly, I think the thing I am most proud of is the fact that the book isn't just my experience or my business. I went out and looked at businesses all over the country and I found experts, people who work with wealth management, people who work with a foundation, people who are helping with mergers and acquisitions. And they were all so kind and giving to share their knowledge. And so I really felt like putting this all together in one place could be really important for small business owners.
And one page that I've got sticky, I've mentioned I have sticky notes everywhere. It's on page 9, and it's one of the chapter headings is a love-hate relationship. And you say, I believe there's always been a love-hate relationship between small business and big business. Let's talk about that because I think that's pretty important. I also think a lot of people don't really understand what a small business is.
Well, and that's interesting you should say that because I would agree with you. I think people tend to think of small business as maybe the shop on Main Street or a solopreneur or, a small service provider. Actually, small business as defined by the SBA can be up to 500 employees, which is really a pretty big business if you think about it. And then there are micro businesses, which might be 10 employees or less, but small businesses have often felt like big business gets all the breaks, that when regulations are made or when people are looking at who to supply them, they tend to look at larger entities, right? That's kind of that myth. And then big businesses always think that small business is the one that's kind of the darling of the consumer world, that small business is viewed as that little engine that could, and that they get all the notoriety and the accolades. And so I find it really interesting and that there's this sort of dichotomy here of how people look at it. And what I love to say is that there are strengths in both kinds of entities. And quite frankly, there are things small businesses can learn from big businesses. And I think often big business, if they were to look at the ways in which small business gets things done, they could adopt some of the attitudes and practices that we have. So I describe that kind of love-hate relationship. I am a small business. And yet most of my customers are very large businesses. And I have found that for me, it's a huge advantage to be a small business because we can bring fresh ideas. We're responsive. We don't have layers of attorneys and processes and complicated procedures. Doing business with us it's delightful, is what my customers tell me. They go, wow, you get things done.
So, agility. Small businesses are much more agile.
Absolutely. And, it's interesting because, agile as a process is being adopted by a lot of large businesses as a way to take big, huge projects and piece them into kind of digestible doses and get things done. And yet that's the way we've always operated. I jokingly say, when lean was a huge initiative, I say, well, we small businesses, we don't have to learn about getting lean because we are already lean. But it is interesting. And I think playing to your strengths, and this is something that I love to tell small businesses because I think so many of them are afraid. I think they hear the horror stories about big businesses being demanding and, constant pressure to reduce costs. And, and I just think some of that is really overblown. I really do. Granted, there are things you need to know if you are going to work with large businesses. You have to be prepared. You got to be at the top of your game. but it certainly isn't anything to be afraid of. And in fact, there's huge opportunity if you just kind of jump in.
And that makes sense. And then I turn to page 10, and I love this because it's really what we're talking about here. Why big businesses like small businesses. And I read that and I went, oh, they do? So off I went.
Yes, they absolutely do. And, it's interesting because I think when you have flexibility as a small business and you're willing to step out and do things, big businesses really like that. In fact, many of the people that I interviewed who are either procurement officers or buyers say the thing that they love about a small business is that when they ask them to do something, even if it's something that maybe isn't part of their standard operating procedure, they're flexible enough to kind of change course and do something. And the other thing that big businesses love is that they often get to work with the owner or the executive staff of a small business. Whereas when they're working with a large entity, sometimes they're working with an account manager and that account manager changes over and the people change over. But small businesses have that really, good, strong core of people. And, they get to talk to the owner. They get to talk to the people who are actually doing the work. And that makes a big difference in the outcome, because when you have that kind of communication, the results are much better.
And I was writing down, I do this a lot when I'm talking with people. I take notes because I'm like, oh, I have to go back to that. What I wrote down, you were talking about you have to be flexible enough. I wrote down that equals curiosity. How can we get this done?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think one of the things that people are often afraid to do is to challenge what someone is asking them to do.
Mm-hmm.
And here in my office, often they'll say, well, the customer wants X. And I will say, but is that what they really need? Is that really what they want? Could we maybe come up with a different and a better solution for them? And there's where the curiosity comes into play. If you're someone who doesn't just do what you're told, but come back with an alternative solution, and maybe they don't accept it, but even the fact that you're thinking enough about how to give them the best product, the best solution, I think is very impressive, because it shows that you have that curiosity. And when you have that, you're a true partner. You're not just a supplier, someone who kind of does what is told and kicks something out the door.
That is so true. And I have found, listen, as entrepreneurs, as small business owners, I think you'll agree with this. We fail daily, big, little, micro. We're going to make boo-boos all day.
Absolutely.
And we have to pull up our panties and get back to work. But what I have found, in my case in particular, is when I make a boo-boo or something just did not go the way I envisioned it, once I walk away and I shake it off and maybe curse a little bit or a lot, depends what's happening. But my creative brain will, kick the lizard brain aside and say, "Ooh, better idea."
Yeah. Often I think people are afraid of failure and afraid to say they failed.
Oh no, we fail all day. All day.
You know what? I actually think we need to teach people how to fail, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. When you fail at something, you often are far more introspective. It's like, okay, what could I have done differently? Wait a minute, what did I miss here, or what did I make an assumption about that wasn't correct? When we do that, the next time around we do it better. When I do something and I'm successful, like out of the gate, I'm that kind of overnight success. It's like, wait a minute, how did I do that? I think we spend more time kind of doing that Monday morning quarterbacking thing when we are a failure. And I probably learned more from the times that I've done things. And believe me, over the time, I've hired people I shouldn't have hired. I've, tried to sell products that we probably didn't need to sell, but every single time you learn that, and then you go back out there, and I don't know. I'm also afraid. I'm not afraid to say I don't know.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Thing. Yeah,
I'll say I don't have a clue, but I'll find out for you.
absolutely.
Small businesses love to experiment. I think we talked a little bit about that. But on page 15, you've got this wonderful little section that says tips to succeed. And I love your little checklist. So, but I don't want to have to race through this book, but I want people to read it. So what are the 4 key phases that successful business owners absolutely must, that's underlined, focus on the life cycle of a small business? You've identified these. So share.
Absolutely. So, I love to look at startup, and a lot of people do look at startup, but what I often say that is very different than some people is that you need to have an exit plan right at startup. And some people will go, you're just in the initial phases. But what people don't sometimes understand is that if you understand how you want to exit, it drives how you are going to grow and sustain that business. So let's say, for example, that you want to just go like crazy and you're growing the business to sell it and move on to do something else. Okay, that's a completely different kind of business model than someone who wants to be in a business for 20 or 30 years. That exit plan is totally different. If you think about as an exit plan that maybe you don't need to sell it to anyone, well, then perhaps what you're creating is a lifestyle. And there's nothing wrong with a lifestyle business, but in that kind of business, there's not a lot to sell when you are done. So I think in startup, you have to really think about what is going to be that exit plan. And quite honestly, the question that I ask people is, do you have the passion and the staying power? Because I think some people are really strong at startup and they lose the passion really quickly. So in the startup phase, I think you have to really think about all of those things and obviously a lot more. And then I move into that second phase, which is you're really focusing on the operations. And this is where I think small businesses can really take a clue from big businesses. Because often a small business, all the knowledge is in the head of the owner or the manager. And what I love to say is, what happens if you get hit by a bus tomorrow? In fact, in my 35 years, I've gotten hit by a bus a lot of times because I'm always asking the question. And so here's where small businesses need to do what big businesses do. They need to have systems in place. They need to have an infrastructure. They need to document everything. I tell the story of a co-founder of Big B Coffee, and they are one of the fastest growing franchises and just an amazing small company. And he said to me, you document everything, including if someone walks into my coffee shop and the person is already serving a customer, how do they greet the customer at the far end? Now, that's getting pretty picky about documenting. But that's the kind of documentation that people need to have in place so that everyone knows where to get things. And then also the use of technology. When you're in that operational phase, there's a lot of technology that's available, but people don't have a strategy for it. So what they end up doing is they buy into this piece of technology and they add on this one and this one, but there's not really a strategy. And so I think as you grow, you have to really pay a lot more attention to the operations. And
Shiny object syndrome, we see it all the time.
Yes,
I'm guilty.
Absolutely. Well, and the other thing that I will tell you is that in that operational phase, what I also think you have to look at is you have to get really clear about who you're operating for. Who are those customers? Because I think what happens at startup is in the startup phase, people just, they're just so happy to have customers that they get people in the door. When you get into really focusing on that operational phase, you may find that you need to send customers away. May need to really refine who's that ideal customer that your operation is ideally suited to work with, and really kind of prune out that customer list and add more in of the kinds of people that you're going to really need to service. So, and then also in the operational phase, I think a lot of people pay attention to how they make something or how they do something, but not necessarily so much about what's their company voice and, what is it that they're trying to project out to the public? Kind of that, what's the face of your business? And there's where you really need to start thinking about how you're going to develop really what that company look is, because people do business with people and customers, companies and brands that they love. And so you have to think about that.
And they have to trust you. If you're a CEO, this just blew up on Twitter, and I'm not going to say who it was, but this CEO lost $210 million, I think it was, the last time I checked, because he got political.
Yeah. Well, and in that operational phase, I think what happens is, you've started hiring people, you've got processes in place, and many small business owners, quite honestly, don't know how to be the boss. They don't know how to be the leader because they haven't necessarily needed to do that. But this is when things like understanding what your values are and operating with integrity and how do you make sure that you're developing a culture where people want to work and want to stay? Those things
they want to contribute. You need to hear the people that are working with you and for you, because they're your soldiers. They're the ones that are out there. They're in the trenches. They know what's going on. Listen to them.
Yeah. And, a lot has been said about the fact that we have so many generations. I have 5 generations working in my place. And I know some who have, 3, some have 4. I have 5. There is a huge age difference. What I have discovered is that each generation has strengths. And you have to, I'm a baby boomer. And I know that there are things that I look at and things that I do that maybe are not what the marketplace is looking for today. And this is where I rely on my younger employees. And I'm always saying, tell me what you think. Tell me what you think. And if they say, well, how would you do it? I say, well, you might do it differently than I do. And that's fine as long as we get results. And it is hard. I'm going to tell you, it's not always easy when you have this many generations. But here's where, if you put together a solid operation and you've documented things and people know how to do things in the workplace and you've onboarded them properly, then they can get creative and they can do a lot of really cool things. And that's what moves the business ahead.
Well, absolutely. And if they can communicate with each other and see the validity in the different things that, we're putting out this or we're talking about this. Oh, I never thought of that. But they have to be able to speak with one another.
Yeah, absolutely. So that third phase that I talk about is growth. And, this one's very tricky because there are a lot of people and books out there about growth. And what I have to say to people is growth is great, but you only get one shot at it. And if you grow wildly and you have not done what needed to be done in that operational phase, you probably don't get another shot. So I have a couple of strategies that I love when I talk about growth. And one of them is called pay attention to small customers because they get bigger. Sometimes when you are looking to grow, what you do is you look at smaller organizations that are on a growth path and you get in and you learn their business and you develop that relationship. And then as they grow, you're growing. So even though I work with large global giants, names that everyone knows, I'm always looking for smaller, innovative, entrepreneurial companies because I know that as they are growing, they're going to bring us right along with them. So that's one of the strategies. And then the other thing that I look at when I talk about growth is that it's really important that you have to, if you find companies where today there are so many that are an umbrella for many companies. So, for example, we work with one company that has 4 companies under them. So if we get one of those business units, now those people, we ask them to introduce us to the others. And frankly, that's how we have grown, one company, but lots of awareness with all of their partners, their affiliates, their suppliers. You look at that whole supply chain because when people like you, they are willing to recommend you. So I think that growth piece of it is great. And I often say, I know people love to talk about wild growth. I have always said measured. That's where I'm more comfortable, but I think some people you have to look at what's your comfort level, but you certainly have to, as you grow, understand that you will not be able to do things as you did when you were a small operation. I can't know everything that's going through this place because there are too many projects. So I have to really delegate and trust and really believe that the work is getting done well. And then that last phase that I like to talk about, and this is one people do not like to talk about, which is stepping out. And I kind of started to make lists for myself. What are the signs you should stay? What are the signs you should go? I think one of the biggest things that I think people don't consider is that sometimes the passion that they once had for doing what they do, it changes over time. Our priorities change. I can tell you some of the things that I was really passionate about when I started my business. I'm not passionate about anymore, but there are other things I'm still very passionate about. I'm really passionate about growing my team and helping them develop their skills and getting new customers. There's some things that are maybe the more mundane tasks, but that's why you bring people in. Then they get to do those things and grow up. But I do think that when people's priorities change, they don't realize it. And often their customers and their employees realize it before they do. They're hanging on and not necessarily doing what's right for the business. But then there are those people, one gentleman that I interviewed who said he's never going to retire. He does not plan to retire ever. He said, they'll carry me out, he said, with my boots on. Yeah,
I understand that. My plan is to fall asleep and when I'm about 100, 115, somewhere around there, and fall asleep, while I'm plotting world domination and just not wake up again.
Yeah. But
I have a plan. It's planned.
But there are people who want to move on to another adventure.
Gotcha.
And so it's not necessarily that they're going to retire, but they are going to take all of that energy and enthusiasm and they are going to use it in a different way. For me, I am doing a lot more speaking to entrepreneurs and writing and trying to do give backs and advocating because that's where my passion now is. Am I ever going to stop working? I seriously doubt it because I love what I do. But it may be that I do it in different ways. And what's really fun is I've interviewed different business owners. So my sister and her husband own an extremely successful business in the Raleigh-Durham area. And they sold the business about 7 years ago. And my sister is one of these people who literally is sitting on a beach eating bonbons and loving it and absolutely loving it. I go, don't you want to volunteer somewhere? She goes, I'm happy.
Yeah, give her be.
There are other people that I interviewed for the book who sold the business and went home one day and sat on the couch and what am I going to do now? And then they went back to work. So I think, there's not one right thing, but what you have to do is you have to think about it, because you don't want to just let it happen to you. You want it to be intentional. You want to go sit on the beach? Great. I said to my sister, I'll come down and sit with you here and there on the beach and have a bonbon, but not every day.
No, I couldn't do it either, but good for her. She earned it, and now she's living her best life.
Well, and she's an amazing cook, and she has lots of friends, and they do things with the church, and she has a grandchild. And, there are things that become more important to you. So I just think if you think about it, and if you're not ready to step out, at least explore having a second look or a third look at that exit plan that you did when you started up. It's amazing to me how many people who are in their 50s and 60s and have never even thought about an exit plan.
I know people like that too. But what I hear from them is, well, I'm never going to quit. Yeah, you are. There's going to be a health or something's going to happen, or you're just going to get good and sick of it.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to quit at some point. You're going to, as you say, step out. So you have to have a plan. And I wanted to go back a little bit. I'm on chapter 4. Get smart about partnering, create a business prenup, which I think is so important. What we're talking about here, how do you exit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It is the reason that chapter exists is that when I started my business, I actually did have a partner. And quite honestly, I looked at, all the things they tell you to look at. And what I discovered is that wasn't enough. And so I developed my concept of having a business prenup. And the things that you look at are things that maybe you wouldn't necessarily think would be an issue. But, it's not the business things that sort of get you. It's the other things. It's like,
the personal things, right?
Right.
It's almost like going through a really bad marriage and saying, I hate you. I'm leaving.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I actually went to business counseling with my ex-partner to see if we couldn't figure it out. But
tell us about that. I didn't know such a thing existed.
Oh yes, there are actually business consulting groups that do it. It's kind of like counseling for business owners. It wasn't successful. I have to say, I'm glad I did it. We talked about, what were our goals, what were our ambitions, but as people, we were different people. I have the feeling that knowledge should be shared. I believe that when you bring people into your organization, it is your responsibility as a leader to give those people opportunities for development. I like to say I want to work myself out of a job because then I can go find the next cool thing and then I'll teach someone how to do that. His real goal was to keep things small and tight and didn't want to share information. And, you can't grow if you're not going to do that. So we discovered we were very different people. He didn't like having business advisors. He thought he could do a lot of things himself. If you're a small business owner today, it's really important that you have good small business advisors because regulations change. Things change and you can't possibly stay up with all of it. That's why you need those professionals. So, I think having a business partner and it works for a lot of people. For some people, it's just as an example, my sister and her husband ran their business together for 20 years. It was an amazing partnership, personal and professional. That doesn't happen with everyone. And sometimes as you get down the road, you will find that you are growing in different directions. You want different things. And so you will often see people exiting businesses and then trying to figure out what they're going to do next. Some of the reason for that is people change. Some of it is you missed something at startup that you didn't realize about that business partner. But then when you get to that exit plan, I can tell you when I and my partner broke up, We had done a really good job of having legal documents in place that gave us the roadmap. And it was either I buy him out, he buys me out, we sell the whole thing. As it happened, I bought him out. And frankly, the business has done really well since then. So I've never entertained the decision to bring in another partner. I have granted phantom stock to my employees because I think that's important that they have some say in the business and that. But everyone needs to think about what does that ideal look like? Is that ideal achievable? And the more you think about it, and those plans change, I've had 2 or 3 plans in place and they've changed. And so now I'm working on the next plan. But, as a business owner, you're responsible for people's lives. If you have employees, it's your responsibility to do what is best for the business. And that means having a lot of things in place.
Well, that makes sense. And I've got to tell you, I've been skipping around on the book. I've sticky notes, index cards. I've even got index cards in here, colored index cards. They're important. I know what I'm looking at by the color of what I'm looking at. But on chapter 16, you say create, and this is kind of what we're talking about now, create brand fanatics and nurture them. Now that can go any which way. I mean, brand fanatics can be the people who are coming to you to hire you or buy your purchase from you. That can also be part of your culture. Is that correct?
Absolutely. In fact, I'm going to say if your employees are not brand fanatics, if they don't love what they do, they cannot project that to the outside.
There you go. That's what I was trying to ask.
It doesn't. In fact, I talk about, people will say, well, your name is on the door. My name may be on the door, but you know what? Every one of these people that is in this office feels an ownership in the business. And I can't tell you how proud I am when I hear them on the phone and they're talking about it. Or I will get a call from one of them and they'll say, a customer needs this. And I just decided we're going to go ahead and do it. Is that okay? Well, of course it's okay. I'm just excited that they take the initiative. But if you have this, if people love what they do, it's infectious. There is not a time that I don't send a crew out. And this happened again last week. I sent some people out, got on a plane, went and visited a customer, came back, and they're 2 of my younger employees. And I got the most lovely emails back from them saying, wow, it was such a pleasure to work with this team. My team they are brand fanatics, but now that customer's a brand fanatic. That customer is going to go talk to other people about us. In fact, a quick story that I have, I got a call from a company just outside of Chicago. This is a number of months back. And the woman said, is this Cynthia? And I said, yes. And she gave me her name. And she said, my boss told me to find you. And I started laughing. I said, okay. And the name of the company I did not know. And I said, well, why? And she said, well, he was at a conference somewhere down in Florida. There was a session and they were talking about the importance of video marketing. And this person said, well, if you're looking for someone who will do a great job for your company, just call Cynthia Kay and Company. And so he came home, right, said to his marketing person, go find them. Okay. Now, I don't know who that brand fanatic was that was in the room down in Florida. I kind of have a guess. I mean, I know the company. I probably don't know the person. But when you get that kind of an endorsement that they go, oh, just that she had to find me, right? That to me is a great example of creating a brand fanatic. And it's not like I'm a retail brand or I make, ice cream or I make shoes or I make something like that. I mean, we are a services company. So sometimes people think, oh, well, a brand is just for, something that you make that someone uses. No, you can have brand fanatics when you are a service company. They're out there telling people what a great job you did for them. And those are the best kind of customers that you want because they come to you with an open mind. They will listen to what you have to say.
They do. And I scooted over to page 144, a brand champion or two. And you say you should also seriously consider cultivating a number of champions at a company because businesses are constantly shifting people around. Don't forget about that part. And therefore, it's likely that today's champion may not be in a position to help you tomorrow. Let's talk about that. And you've got a great quote from Mark Peters, the CEO of Butterball Farms.
Yes. And, I just so appreciate all the people that told us stories. And Mark's story is really a great one because he talks about the fact that when you're sitting in a room with someone, and I love that he says there's rarely one person at the table who can say yes to you, right? But if anybody says
I didn't even think
no,
about that.
if anybody says no, you're out. And this is why it is so important that, you don't just try to educate one person. You have multiple contacts. And then you really have to, I call it pull out all the stops. You want to wow people. People want to be wowed. And if they aren't, they're going to go to someone who does wow, who maybe doesn't even have as great a product or service as you have. Mark has just an amazing point of view when it comes to that, and has just done some really great work. But he talks about, really wanting to work with people. And I would tell you also, as the business owner, you want to have suppliers that are supplying you that you love, because it kind of goes both ways. If you look at that supply chain, you want to love the people who are your suppliers, and you want the people that you're serving to love you. And if you create those brand champions and then you do something super creative for them, and really give them something that they're not going to get somewhere else, or make it easier for them than someone else does. I think convenience today is a huge thing. Sometimes it's so complicated to do business with organizations that people just quit. They go to someone else where it's easier. So, I think that those sorts of things are really important. And the brand champion isn't always the person that you think it's going to be. Sometimes it's that behind the scenes player. Believe it or not, it might be the project manager. It might be an administrative assistant. I mean, there's a lot of people that influence the decision makers. So don't discount people just because they don't have a title. Often the people who can help you the most are the ones who can give you knowledge and share with you things that will help you in that sale. And they might not be that decision maker. They may be the people that are surrounding that decision maker, the gatekeepers.
Oh, absolutely. Those are the people you really want to win over. And at the end of this chapter, I love that you always have these tips at the end of each chapter. And your tips to succeed is, one, to turn someone into a brand loyalist or a brand fanatic. You need to solve a problem for them. Well, that's, kind of self-explanatory. Then you say, try to identify individuals who can provide you with information and be your champion. And it might be, as you just said, the behind the scenes player. And if at all possible, have a number of individuals in different areas to help you make connections. And then finally, pull out all the stops to make your champions look good. They got you in the door and they can help you keep the business coming.
Yeah. And also, it's really important that you don't try to take credit for it. I sometimes see people go, well, yeah, but, we did. And you know what? I always love to say my job is to make the customers look good. That's my job. And I love it. I love being behind the scenes and being able to do that. And so, in fact, sometimes I have to stop myself because I need to say, yeah, we need to pat ourselves a little bit on the back. Go ahead and brag sometimes.
Well, yeah, but doing that internally does make more sense because nobody likes a braggart. Yes, we do want to know if we're going to work with you or hire you to work with our business. Those can be internal conversations, but they shouldn't be splashed all over the place, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I agree with you.
Nobody likes a braggart. Ask me how I know. Because every once in a while, I'll say, Denise, take a seat. Stop. Okay, so I'm still scooting through this book. It really is a great book, but I wanted to talk because I'm a nerd. I am a nerd in stilettos. Let's talk about the technology. Is it your friend or is it your foe? You know what I'm going to say.
You're going to say it's your foe, right?
No, I think you have to have technology.
Oh,
I'm a nerd.
okay.
Seriously, I am a big nerd. If I can think of a difficult way to do it, my lizard brain will take over and go, ooh. And then my creative brain has to say, take a seat. Let's think about this.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, as I said a little bit earlier, I think some of the problem is with technology that there's just so much of it that it can be just overwhelming for people.
It can, and be careful. You listen to people who know what they're doing. Don't just jump onto chat, GPT, because it's out there. And then, I mean, seriously, I'm going to tell y'all right now, you can ruin your brand if you're not careful.
Yeah. And I'm amazed that people don't know that, but I think a lot of people don't. So what I like to do is say to people, there's a couple of things. One, I think sometimes people don't budget for technology. They just like they don't budget for marketing. A lot of small companies don't budget for technology either. And I think you need to really consider both what's available, but also having some guidance from people. So I will tell you what I did, because for a while, I actually had someone in-house who was doing IT and technology for us. And what I discovered is that I didn't know what I didn't know. I mean, it's hard to manage.
You don't know what to ask, and that's the biggest problem. People say, oh, yeah, we can do this, we can do this. If you don't ask serious questions, you're going to get gobbledygook. Trust me on this.
Yeah. And you probably know more than I do, but how do you even manage someone when sometimes you don't even know the questions to ask about this technology? So what I ended up doing was going out and looking at technology companies and looking at those. And frankly, we're not a customer for a lot of them. Some people only want, 100 or more users or 250 or more users. So smaller businesses have to really look at what's the sweet spot of the technology company. And then I like to say, do an audit. And I did. I had someone do a technology audit. They came in and they looked at what we had. They looked at our software licenses. They looked at our firewall. They looked at our systems. And then they came back with some recommendations. And often the people who do the audit are not the people who will actually be the executors that will be your managed IT company. And that's good because they're going to give you that objective point of view. And I believe that is that's what you need. You need somebody that is objective. My expert in this area was Chad Paulman, and Chad runs an amazing business called New Wave Technologies. He's also on a Cisco advisory board, so he really knows this stuff. But he talks about what is kind of the dirty little secret about technology. And what people don't know is that it's an unregulated industry. So it's not like if I'm going to go to a CPA or I'm going to go to an attorney or I'm going to go to someone that has, the credentials. Not everybody who runs an IT company has all the certifications and licenses that are probably needed. And how do you even know if someone is staying current? So I think it's really important that you do some assessments, that you ask people, who are they using? I mean, that's how we found ours. Again, here's where your word of mouth, your network. And then don't be afraid to challenge people when they come back. We've switched IT companies a couple of times, and we finally have one that we were very pleased with, but sometimes it takes a little trial and error. But I think that one thing I do believe is that if you don't embrace technology, you might as well forget it, because the world is going that way, whether you like it or not. Even in my industry, there are some places where we are using AI. For example, in the photography, where AI has been built into some of the software, where if you're going to color correct something, for example, it'll get you 80% of the way. And then you still have to go in and work it. But there are some really good uses for AI. And then there are some very bad uses, as you said, for AI. And there's where you do the wrong thing. And your credibility, really trying to repair that is next to impossible.
It is. And look, I love AI. I'm fascinated with it. Yeah, I dream in code. I build websites while I'm standing over a pot of gumbo. This is how my brain works. Fascinating, I know. And I do have a sense of humor, so I'm not your normal techie nerd. But the thing is, with AI, with chat, with any of these new things that are coming up, test them. Do not take the first hallucination they give you. And there's a reason why that's a term. Oh, ChatGPT is hallucinating. Yes, it is. But I like to use it to get ideas. I get ideas. Ooh, let me go look at that. And then off I go. Sometimes I go down a rabbit hole. Sometimes I'm like, that's brilliant. Let me work with that. But I use it specifically these days to give me ideas. Because sometimes my creative brain says, I'm tired. So I need new ideas. There's ways to use it, but find the experts, not people. I'm telling the audience this, and I mean it, not people who did like they did with the VA industry some years ago, like people are doing with the podcast industry. All of a sudden they're experts because they have a keyboard. They're not. Find people who actually know what they're doing and can guide you or consult with you or show you some better ideas. Don't just take the first thing that comes down the road. Do your homework. Did I sound mad? I think I sounded
No, but
mad.
You know what? But you just said something that really struck me. A lot of times in business, there are consultants, and frankly, everybody's writing a book. And what I want to say is, but they've never signed the front of a check. And I know some people don't sign the fronts of checks anymore. But
All right.
that's my analogy. But they've never done the thing they are trying to teach other people to do.
Exactly. You just said it better than I did.
Yeah. And I find that I get annoyed at that because you don't know that you're giving good advice. And if people are listening to you and that advice is not solid advice, and we already know what the success and failure rate is of small business, you're listening to bad ideas, you are going to be one of those people that doesn't make it.
No doubt about it. And listen, I know we've got maybe about 5 or 6 minutes left, but I have another sticky note, and that's on Chapter 19, give something away, get more business. And I've heard this all of my business life. Oh, you've got to give things away. And then other people say, oh, I don't want to give my best ideas. It's a conflict. But one of you cover what to give away, and then you cover who is a great target for a giveaway. My favorite part of this particular part of the book is giving back. So we chat about this chapter a little bit.
First of all, I love that. And my first rule, though, about giving back is if you're doing it because you think you're going to get more business, don't do it. You have to, in my mind, it has to come from a good place. My background and my whole history, my father was a small business owner. And so from the time that I was growing up, I saw how my dad and his business did a give back. Now, I will tell you, my dad was a dry cleaner, right? He was a CPA by background, but He went into business with his brothers and they ran a dry cleaning. Oh, and a little Greek chili dog restaurant too. So,
Were they next to each other?
Yeah, absolutely.
You got the chili on your shirt. Where do you go next?
You go to the dry cleaners. There you go. It was
That's smart.
Customers. But what I learned from my dad was he was always giving to organizations. So little league teams that needed their kids uniforms done, or churches that needed, vestments cleaned, or the theater they were always doing something, and they were always volunteering to help. But it was always something that my dad had a passion for and my mom had a passion for. And my dad always said, you have been blessed. God's given us a lot, and it is our responsibility to pay it forward. So when I worked in television, part of my most favorite thing to do was to work on the features for nonprofits and the things that, helped community organizations. Well, when I started the business, that became part of what we did. And over the years, we have given away hundreds of thousands of dollars of media production services. I've served on boards where, I lend my expertise to organizations. My employees serve on boards. They get time off. We go and we do a project for someone. This giving back is something, there's a couple of things. One, it feels really good. It feels good because you're giving somebody something of value that they can't do. And every company has something that they can do that nobody else can do. So you got to look at what it is you can do that's the give back. It makes the people who work here feel good. I had an employee who all through college did a video for a group called Angels in Action. And when she came here, she said, could we keep doing their promotions for them? They do a once a year fundraiser. Absolutely. If you have a passion for it, I want you to do that. So that give back is an important thing. It makes people feel good. Does it get your name out? Absolutely. And that's great too. And if people want to come to you, that's wonderful. But the reason you do the give back is because as an organization, while you're working on these things, it builds your team. It makes people feel good and proud about what they do.
And I love that she felt comfortable enough with your culture to ask you that. That's not something you would think, as part of the hiring process. Oh, by the way, you just wouldn't think it.
No, but I also think, that there's where you find the differences in the generations. There are things that are very important to them. Yeah. So, and then the idea of, giving something away, I will tell you, I spend a lot of time with other business owners talking about, and sometimes I go, please don't start a business. I don't think you're ready, Or if you're ready, you might want to go get some education and some help first. But I think, some of that is also giving back. And then, giving something away. In my case, we sometimes give away ideas. Or I will tell you, we have had customers who have gone through very tough times during the pandemic and during the recession that happened years ago. And we actually discounted our prices to help our customers so that they could continue to do things. We found ways to simplify projects so they could because they didn't have the budgets. You know what? That creates loyalty. When you do that, people appreciate it. Now, every once in a while you get the one that doesn't appreciate it and goes away. But I think more often than not, when you are that invested in people and you care about them and they see that, they are willing to talk about you, come back to you. That's a true partnership in my mind.
I agree with you. Cynthia, this has been an amazing conversation, and I thank you so much. So do me a favor and first of all, do you have any last thoughts to share? And then tell our listeners how they can connect with you on the web and find your book. And by the way, y'all, read the book. Seriously.
Well, I so appreciate that. Well, the book, Small Business, Big Success, Proven Strategies to Beat the Odds and Grow a Great Business, because they do want companies to beat the odds. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Porchlight. I'm available to speak, and the easiest way to connect with me is Cynthia Kay biz.com, or I'm on LinkedIn. So any of those ways. And I have to tell you, I so appreciate the thoughtfulness of the questions, Denise, and the time that you spent reading it. That means a lot.
The book is terrific, and I genuinely appreciate you sending it to me. And I want to ask you very quickly. I know a lot of other high-level podcast hosts. Should I introduce you?
Absolutely. I
Have
would
to.
love that.
Okay, I'll make that happen today and tomorrow. I always go to them and say, listen, I just had this terrific conversation with my guest, Cynthia Kay, and can I introduce you? And they always, 100% of the time, say yes. But I don't want to just say to you, hey, you've got people
No.
coming at your way. You need to know
And,
they're coming.
and Denise, I love talking about this, and I truly do mean. I mean, seriously, sometimes they don't know who you are or what you've done, and they haven't taken the time. So I really appreciate the effort and the time you put into it. I'd love to meet you someday.
My pleasure. I mean, I have thoroughly enjoyed chatting with you, and I do love the book. Like I say, I've got, and I say this on my podcast, it's on my podcast page, but people like you, my guests, become my mentors in so many ways, so many ways. And when these books land on my doorstep, I am honored to read them and share them. Now, I have to say, I've got 3 bookcases in here. One is, that's I can reach over and grab it without getting out of my chair, because those are the ones in all the time. Another one that I actually have to walk a few feet to get to. Those are important. I'm going to be delving into them quite a bit, but they're over there. And then a third one is like, these are great books, but I'm not going to, they're not going to be a passion for me. I won't give them away. Those books are important. They were gifted. They're mine, but you're going to be on the first shelf. Just so you already are. In fact, I'm going to take a picture of it. You are stacked on top of one of my last guests. This was a fascinating one. That book is You Can't Market Manure at Lunchtime.
I saw that, and I want to listen to that podcast.
Listen to it. It's fascinating. We talk about pig manure. It's fascinating. But you're on top of her book, and both of these books, I'm looking at them, going, ooh, and I can see my sticky notes on them, because I will not mark a book. It's against my religion. I just can't do it.
I know. I'm the same way. It's like I cannot put that mark in there.
No, my librarian friend who practically raised me come summertime when I was a kid would raise up and clobber me. So
Oh my God.
I know. Cynthia, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Really
I really appreciate it. And I will try and stay in touch, because I would love to chat with you again. All right.
And listen, when you've got anything going on that's new or that you want the audience to know about, you've got my phone number and you've got my email address. Get in touch. Seriously.
I will.
Okay.
I will.
Listen,
all right. Thanks, Denise. Have a good one.
My pleasure. You too. So listen to the audience as we conclude today's episode. Your feedback means a lot to me. And if you found the show helpful, please support us with a quick review on iTunes. And I ask you that because your input is vital in my mission to inspire and empower more individuals. So don't forget to hit subscribe, leave a review, and share your Partner in Success Radio with friends. And be sure to find Cynthia Kay on the web and connect with her and grab her book. It's available on Amazon. So thank you for tuning in, and I will see you next week.
Get your voice heard. If you would like to launch your own far-reaching podcast, contact Denise Griffitts at yourofficeontheweb.com and go to the podcast tab.